in that case. Ben Schultz asks, how many philosophers are taking the AI-dominated future seriously? And I think the implication of the question is that many academics out there are not taking this seriously or are thinking about other stuff and perhaps should be thinking about this question.
My sense is that there's kind of a split where I've definitely seen a lot of philosophers take AI seriously, and probably honestly increasingly so, like as AI models do become more capable and like a lot of the things that people were worried about in terms of impact on society have started to kind of come true in a sense. Like we're seeing them have a larger impact on education and just be more capable. I've definitely seen like more engagement from like all sorts of academics, but that definitely includes a lot of philosophers. I do think that early on, and maybe to some degree now, there was this like slightly unfortunate dynamic that happened where I think there was a kind of perception that if you were in the group of people saying, hey, we're kind of worried about AI, it might be a big deal. It seems like it's really, like capabilities are scaling quite a lot. This got kind of like lumped together with something like hyping AI. There was, I think, a period where there was probably a little bit more antagonism towards this view. And now I think that I'm kind of hoping that people are starting to detach the view. Like you can think that AI is going to be a big deal. It might be very capable and also be like very skeptical of it or worried about it or think that, we have to be careful about it. But basically like there's a whole range of views. And I think it would be bad as people kind of like clustered many views together here in terms of like where the technology is going, but also like how it should be developed. So yeah, I think that that's happening less and less as more people engage with it. And that's like a good thing to see.
A kind of similar question from Kyle Cabasaris. How do you minimize the tension between philosophical ideals and the engineering realities of the model? And I guess he's talking about when you are working on things like character, which we'll discuss in more detail. But is there a clash between the sort of the technology and the philosophical ideals that you might be thinking about?
I don't know if I'm like interpreting the question in the wrong way, but like one thing that being kind of like a philosopher by training and then coming into this field that's been really interesting is you see the effect of like what happens when like the rubber hits the road. I've wondered if this happens in other domains. So like there's a big difference between, imagine you're like a specialist in, I don't know, doing like cost benefit analysis of drugs, say, and then suddenly like, an institute that determines whether like health insurance should cover a drug or not comes to you and says, hey, should we cover this drug? You could imagine taking all of your ideal theories and then suddenly being like, oh my gosh, I actually have to like help make a decision. Suddenly, instead of taking like just your like narrow theoretical view, you actually start to, I think, do this thing where you're like, okay, I actually need to take into account all of the context, everything that's going on, all of the different views here, and kind of come to a really like balanced kind of considered view. And I see this a little bit in my own work with like the character, where you kind of can't come at it with this like I have this like theory that I believe is correct, which is what like, a lot of academia, that's kind of what you're doing. You're like defending one view against another, and you're doing a lot of kind of like high level theory work. But then it's a little bit like, you have all of this training in ethics, you have all of these positions you've defended, and then someone is like, how do you like raise a child? And suddenly you're like, actually there's a big difference between like, is this objection to utilitarianism correct or founded on a misconception? And then like, actually, how do you raise a person to be a good person in the world? And it suddenly makes you more appreciate like having to think through like, how should we navigate uncertainty here? What should the attitude towards all of these different theories be?
Right, here's another philosophical question.